The massive orbital station floated in the darkness of space like a metal city among the stars. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its ports every day, bringing the strongest warriors from across the galaxy. This was Tournament Central, home to the most famous fighting competition in known space. Director Keflon walked through the gleaming corridors of his station, his forearms moving papers between different hands as he reviewed applications. His species had run the Galactic Combat Federation for over 300 years. They were good at organizing things, though they had never been fighters themselves. The tournament happened every 2 years. Warriors came from 12 star systems to prove who was the strongest, fastest, and most deadly. The winner became a legend across the galaxy. The losers often did not go home at all. This year looked to be the best yet. Vextari the Destroyer had won 7 times in a row. He came from Krexthul, a world where the gravity was 3 times stronger than most planets. His people were born warriors, trained from childhood to fight and kill. Vextari stood 8 feet tall and weighed as much as a small vehicle. His skin was harder than most armor, and his reflexes were faster than a computer. The betting stations were already taking wagers. Most people put their money on Vextari winning again. A few brave souls bet on other champions, but the odds were not good for anyone else. Keflon stopped at his office and sat behind his desk. He had one more stack of applications to review. Most came from the usual places: warrior worlds, military planets, and species known for their fighting skills. Then he found something unusual. The application came from Earth. Keflon had heard of Earth, but barely. It was a small blue planet that had joined the Galactic Council only 5 years ago. Their technology was basic, their military was tiny, and most other species considered them harmless. They were known for being stubborn and curious, but not dangerous. The human who wanted to enter was named Kim Minho. Keflon looked at his records. Age 28, former construction worker, no military training, no genetic improvements, no cybernetic parts. He was just an ordinary human who somehow thought he could compete with the deadliest fighters in the galaxy. Keflon laughed. It was not a mean laugh, but the kind someone makes when they see something so unlikely it becomes funny. A human in the tournament would be like a house pet trying to fight a dragon. He walked to the communication room where 3 other directors were reviewing applications. All of them belonged to his species, with their thin gray skin and multiple arms. "Look at this," Keflon said, showing them the human application. "A construction worker from Earth wants to enter our tournament." The other directors gathered around to read. Soon they were all laughing. "Does he know what this tournament is?" asked Director Yelmore. "We had a champion from Gorthak last time who could punch through solid metal. Maybe he thinks we are having a building contest," said Director Nexpill. "He could show us how to mix concrete." They laughed again, but then Director Quindar raised a good point. "Should we accept this? The human will die in the first round, maybe in the first minute." Keflon thought about this. The tournament had rules about not accepting participants who had no chance of survival, but technically, every participant signed documents saying they understood the risks. If the human wanted to throw away his life, that was his choice. "Actually," Keflon said slowly, "this might be interesting. The audience always enjoys a good laugh before the real fighting starts, and Earth just joined the council. Letting one of their people participate might be good politics." "You want to use him as entertainment," Quindar said. "Why not? We can put him in the first round against someone who will make it quick. The crowd gets to see how much stronger real warriors are compared to these soft little humans. Then the serious competition can begin." The other directors agreed. They sent back a message accepting Kim Minho's application. They also sent a standard warning about the dangers, though they doubted the human really understood what he was getting into. 3 weeks later, ships began arriving for the tournament. They came from every corner of the galaxy. Massive war vessels brought champions who needed special atmosphere to breathe. Sleek fighters carried assassins so deadly they traveled in suspended sleep. Heavy transports delivered warriors so large they needed special doors. Then came a small dented cargo ship from Earth. Kefalon watched from the control room as the human ship docked. It looked like something a merchant might use to carry supplies between planets, not something that would bring a tournament fighter. Kim Minho stepped off the ship wearing simple clothes and carrying a small bag. He looked around the docking bay with curious eyes, like a tourist visiting a new city. Other arriving warriors pushed past him without a second look. The human was not impressive. He stood average height for his species, maybe 5 feet and 10 inches. His build was normal, the kind that came from physical work but not special training. His dark hair was cut short and neat. He moved with the careful balance of someone used to working in dangerous places, but nothing that suggested fighting skills. Park Sora, Earth's diplomatic representative, met Minho at the dock. She was a small woman with worried eyes who had been arguing against this idea for weeks. "Are you sure about this, Minho?" she asked as they walked toward the registration area. "It's not too late to change your mind. These warriors have been training their whole lives to kill." Minho smiled in a way that was both friendly and determined. "I've been thinking about this for months, Sora. I know what I'm doing. But you've never fought professionally. You worked construction and then took some basic self-defense classes. These aliens are killers." "Different doesn't mean impossible," Minho said quietly. They reached the registration area where other participants were checking in. The sight was terrifying. Warriors in powered armor stood next to creatures that looked like nightmares. Some fighters were so large they had to duck under doorways. Others moved so fast they seemed to blur. All of them looked at the small human, with expressions ranging from confusion to amusement. A few made sounds that might have been laughter in their languages. The registration computer scanned Minho's documents and biological signs. It paused for several seconds, as if double-checking that this weak creature really wanted to enter a death tournament. Finally, it printed out his participant badge and room assignment. Kim Minho was officially entered in the Galactic Combat Tournament. In the director's office, Keflon watched the security cameras show the human walking to his quarters. The other participants barely noticed him. The betting computers had already calculated his chances of survival at less than 2%. "This should be amusing," Keflon said to himself. He had no idea how wrong he was about to be. The tournament began 3 days after all participants arrived. The opening ceremony filled the main arena with thousands of spectators from across the galaxy. They came to see blood, death, and the crowning of the strongest warrior in known. Space. Kim Minho sat in the participant waiting area, watching the other fighters prepare for battle. Some meditated in silence. Others sharpened weapons or tested armor systems. A few practiced combat moves that looked deadly enough to cut through steel. Next to him sat a creature that looked like a walking mountain. This was Gralthok from the high-gravity world of Mordoon. His species had evolved thick, layered skin that worked like natural armor. Their bones were dense as stone, and their muscles could crush metal. Gralthok stood 9 feet tall and weighed over 600 pounds. "You are the human," Gralthok said in a voice like grinding rocks. His translator device made the words understandable, but they still sounded threatening. "Yes," Minho replied calmly. "I have heard about your species. You are weak and soft. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears like paper." "That's mostly true," Minho agreed. Gralthok made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then why are you here? Do you wish to die quickly?" "I'm here to compete," Minho said simply. The alien warrior shook his massive head. "You will not survive the first round. I almost feel bad about this." "Almost? My people believe that dying in honorable combat is better than living as a coward. Perhaps your death will teach other humans not to pretend they are warriors." Minho nodded politely and returned to his preparation. But instead of checking weapons or practicing moves, he was reading. The tournament rules handbook was over 300 pages long. Most fighters only read the basic sections about weapons and arena types. Minho was studying every single page. He also had technical manuals about the station systems: environmental, controls, artificial gravity, atmospheric regulation, structural engineering. The other participants thought he was wasting time. Real warriors didn't need to understand how buildings worked. Park Sora found him 2 hours before his first match. "The medical team is standing by," she said quietly. "If you surrender immediately, they can probably save your life." I appreciate the concern, Minho said, closing his manual. But I think I'll try to win instead. Minho, please be realistic. Your opponent has armor that can stop plasma weapons. His strength is 20 times greater than yours. He's been training to fight since he was a child. All true, Minho agreed. But that doesn't mean he's unbeatable. How can you possibly think that? Minho stood up and started walking toward the preparation chambers. Every system has weaknesses, Sora. Every design has flaws. You just have to know where to look. The first round matches were scheduled throughout the day. The early fights were meant to eliminate the weakest participants quickly, making room for the real competition. Minho's match against Growlthok was scheduled as the third fight, right after 2 other elimination rounds. In the director's booth, Keflon watched the first match end in less than 30 seconds. A warrior from the Ice Moon Frelnex had frozen his opponent solid and then shattered him with a single punch. The crowd cheered and started betting on how long the human would last. The second match lasted almost a full minute. A shape-shifting assassin from the void reaches wrapped around his opponent and squeezed until the creature's exoskeleton cracked. Another quick victory, another dead fighter. Bring out the human, Keflon announced over the station's communication system. Let's see if he can last longer than the last one. The arena transformed for the third match. The tournament used different environments to test fighters in various conditions. For this fight, they selected a standard combat zone with normal, gravity, breathable atmosphere, and basic lighting. No environmental hazards that might make the fight more interesting. Growlthok entered first, his massive form filling the tunnel entrance. The crowd cheered as he raised his arms and roared. His natural armor gleamed under the arena lights. He looked like something built to destroy armies. Then Kim Minho walked out of the opposite tunnel. The crowd went silent for a moment, then began laughing. The small human looked like a child next to the alien giant. He carried no visible weapons and wore simple exercise clothing instead of armor. He moved with calm confidence, but to the spectators it looked more like someone too stupid to understand his danger. The arena's referee system began its standard announcement about rules and victory conditions. Fighters could use any tactics except attacking the audience or leaving the arena. Victory came through death, surrender, or incapacitation of the opponent. During the announcement, Minho walked slowly around the arena's edge. He seemed to be examining the walls, floor, and ceiling. The crowd thought he was stalling for time or looking for a place to hide. Growlthok watched this behavior with growing impatience. Are you ready to die, human? Just getting familiar with the space, Minho replied. It will not matter. No hiding place will save you. The countdown began, 10 seconds until combat started. Growlthok stretched his massive arms and cracked his knuckles. Each finger was as thick as Minho's wrist. 5 seconds. The alien warrior lowered himself into a combat stance. His species were natural grapplers who usually ended fights by crushing their opponents. 3 seconds. Minho stood calmly in the center of the arena, hands at his sides. 2 seconds. Growlthok prepared to charge forward and end this quickly. 1 second. The combat signal sounded. Growlthok rushed forward with surprising speed for something so large. His plan was simple. Grab the human, lift him up, and squeeze until his bones broke. It was how his species had fought for thousands of years. But instead of trying to dodge or run away, Minho did something unexpected. He moved toward one of the arena's control panels built into the sidewall. The panels controlled basic environmental systems for each match: lighting, temperature, atmospheric pressure, and artificial gravity. Most fighters ignored them completely. They were considered part of the background, not combat tools. Minho's hands moved quickly over the controls. Growlthok was only seconds away from reaching him, but those seconds were enough. Suddenly, the artificial gravity in the arena began to fluctuate. Instead of the steady downward pull that everyone expected, gravity started shifting direction every few seconds. First it pulled toward the floor, then toward the ceiling, then toward the walls. Growlthok, who weighed over 600 pounds, found himself thrown off balance. His massive body, built for high-gravity environments, became a disadvantage when gravity kept changing direction. He crashed into a wall, then found himself pulled toward the ceiling. The crowd stopped laughing. Minho, being much lighter, adapted to the changing gravity more easily. He used the wall surfaces to push himself around the arena like he was swimming, through the air. His construction work had included jobs in zero-gravity environments, so this kind of movement was familiar. More importantly, while Gralthok struggled with the shifting gravity, Minho continued working with the arena's control systems. He wasn't just changing gravity randomly. He was creating specific patterns, pulling Gralthok in directions that exposed weak points in his armor. Every armor design had joints and connection points, places where different pieces met and created small gaps. Gralthok's natural armor was incredibly strong, but like any armor, it had to allow movement. That meant vulnerable spots at his joints. During one gravity shift that pulled Gralthok toward the floor, Minho landed next to him and struck precisely at the joint where the alien's arm connected to his shoulder. It was the only spot where the armor was thin enough for human strength to have an effect. Gralthok roared in pain and surprise. No one had ever found that weakness before. The gravity shifted again, this time pulling sideways. Minho used the momentum to strike at another joint, this time behind Gralthok's knee. The massive warrior tried to grab Minho, but the constantly changing gravity made it impossible to predict where either of them would be from 1 second to the next. After 2.5 minutes of this, Gralthok's coordination was completely disrupted. The big warrior, who had seemed unstoppable, was now helpless against an opponent who had turned the arena itself into a weapon. Minho made one final adjustment to the gravity controls, creating a strong downward pull. As Gralthok crashed to the floor stunned and disoriented, Minho landed beside him and placed his hand on the alien's throat. "Yield," Minho said quietly. Gralthok looked up at the small human who had somehow defeated him. His pride was crushed along with his body. After a long moment, he spoke the words that ended the fight. "I yield." The arena went completely silent. Minho had just defeated one of the tournament's most physically powerful fighters, using nothing but intelligence and creativity. He had turned a hopeless mismatch into a victory by thinking about the problem differently than anyone expected. In the director's booth, Keflon stared at the arena in shock. This was not supposed to happen. The human was supposed to die quickly and provide a few moments of entertainment. Instead, he had won, and he had done it in a way that made everyone realize they might have seriously underestimated what humans could do. After Minho's victory over Gralthok, everything changed at Tournament Central. The betting computers had to recalculate odds. The crowd started paying attention to the small human. Most importantly, the tournament directors began to worry. Keflon called an emergency meeting in his office. The 4 directors gathered around a holographic display showing replay footage of the first match. "This should not have been possible," Director Yelmore said, watching Minho manipulate the gravity controls. "The environmental systems are not supposed to be weapons." "Technically, he broke no rules," Director Quindar pointed out. "The regulations say fighters can use any tactics except attacking spectators or leaving the arena. Using arena controls is not forbidden." "Because we never thought anyone would try it," Keflon replied. "Warriors fight with strength, speed, and weapons. They do not play with gravity generators." Director Nexbill pulled up the tournament rulebook on his computer. "Should we add a restriction? Forbid fighters from touching arena controls?" Keflon considered this. "If we change rules now, it looks like we are afraid of one human. But if we do nothing and he keeps winning—" "He will not keep winning," Yelmore interrupted. "His next opponent is Skythrin from the Cloud Cities of Veltar. She flies at 300 miles per hour and attacks from the air. How can gravity tricks help against a flying enemy?" The directors agreed to wait and see. One unusual victory did not make the human a real threat. Skythrin would show everyone that Minho's win was just luck. They were wrong again. 2 days later, Minho faced Skythrin in the second round. The arena was configured for aerial combat, with a high ceiling and floating platforms. Skythrin's species had evolved from flying predators. She had wings that could carry her at incredible speeds and claws sharp enough to cut through metal. The fight began with Skythrun taking to the air immediately. She circled the arena like a hunting bird, looking for the right moment to dive down and tear the human apart. Her species always fought this way: stay airborne, attack from above, use speed and surprise. But before the match started, Minho had spent time studying the arena's acoustic systems. Tournament Central used advanced sound equipment to broadcast fighter voices and combat sounds to the audience. The system included speakers, microphones, and resonance dampeners placed throughout each arena. As Skythrun flew overhead, Minho began manipulating the sound system. He created specific frequency patterns that most species could not hear, but that had a devastating effect on Skythrun's people. Her species had hollow bones to make flight possible. These bones were strong but had a natural resonance frequency. When Minho generated sound waves at exactly that frequency, Skythrun's bones began to vibrate painfully. The flying warrior found herself unable to maintain altitude. The resonance disrupted her balance and coordination. She tried to land on one of the floating platforms, but the sound waves made her dizzy and nauseous. Within 5 minutes, Skythrun was forced to surrender. She could not fly, could barely stand, and was in too much pain to continue fighting. Once again, Minho had won using methods no one expected. Once again, he had broken no written rules while completely changing how the fight worked. The crowd was no longer laughing at the human. They were starting to fear him. In his private quarters, Minho met with Lee Jihoon, Earth's military observer who had arrived to study the tournament. Jihoon was a career officer who specialized in analyzing combat techniques from different worlds. "Skau, are you doing this?" Jihoon asked directly. "I have watched both your fights multiple times. You are not using any special human abilities or secret training." "No secrets," Minho replied. "I am just approaching the problems differently." "What do you mean?" Minho sat down and pulled out his technical manuals. Most warriors think about fighting as a contest between two individuals. Strength against strength, speed against speed, skill against skill. But that is not what this really is. Then what is it? It is a contest between different systems. Every fighter is a biological or technological system. Every arena is an environmental system. Every rule set is a legal system. The tournament itself is an organizational system. Jihoon frowned. "You are treating combat like an engineering problem." "Exactly. In construction work, you learn that every structure has stress points, load limits, and failure modes. Living creatures and machines are the same way. You just have to understand how the systems work, and then you can find ways to break them, or redirect them, or use them in ways their designers never intended." Minho opened one of his manuals to a page covered with diagrams. Growlthok was built for high-gravity combat. His entire fighting style assumed gravity would be constant and predictable. When I changed that assumption, his advantages became disadvantages. What about Skythrun? Flying requires specific bone density and structure. Those same features that make flight possible create acoustic vulnerabilities. I did not make her weaker. I just found a way to use her strengths against her. Jihoon began to understand. You are not fighting these warriors. You are solving them like puzzles. Every system can be understood. Every system can be influenced. The key is figuring out which inputs create which outputs. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the station's communication system. Tournament officials were implementing new rules, effective immediately. All fighters are forbidden from manipulating arena environmental controls during combat. All fighters are forbidden from using arena communication systems as weapons. Any violations will result in immediate disqualification. Minho listened to the announcement with calm interest. They are trying to limit the variables I can control. Will this stop you? No. It will just make me find different approaches. The third round took place 4 days later. Minho's opponent was Morthian, a shape-shifting warrior from the swamp world Zethkul. Morthian could change his physical form to match any threat, growing armor when attacked, becoming fluid when grabbed, or splitting into multiple smaller versions of himself. Shapeshifters were considered nearly impossible to defeat because they could adapt to any combat situation. No matter what strategy an opponent used, Morthian could change his body to counter it. The arena for this fight was a basic combat zone with no environmental controls for Minho to manipulate. The officials thought they had solved the human problem by removing his tools. They had not considered that Minho might bring his own tools. Before the fight, Minho had requested permission to bring a small device into the arena. He claimed it was a medical monitor to track his vital signs during combat. The device was examined and found to contain no weapons or communication equipment, so officials approved it. What they did not realize was that the device could also release trace amounts of specific chemical compounds into the air. These compounds were completely harmless to most species, but had an interesting effect on shapeshifters. Morthian's ability to change form depended on specialized cells that could reorganize themselves at the molecular level. These cells required a specific chemical balance to function properly. When Minho's device began releasing compounds that disrupted this balance, Morthian found himself stuck in whatever form he happened to be using. The shapeshifter tried to adapt to Minho's fighting style by becoming larger and more heavily armored. But once the chemical interference took effect, he could not change back. He was trapped in a form that was strong but slow and clumsy. Minho spent the rest of the fight, staying out of reach and waiting for Morthian to exhaust himself. The shapeshifter eventually collapsed from the effort of trying to move his oversized body around the arena. Another victory. Another solution that no one had anticipated. After the fight, tournament officials spent hours examining Minho's device. They found the chemical release system and immediately banned all such equipment from future matches. But by then, everyone realized the truth. The human was not winning through luck or simple tricks. He was systematically analyzing and defeating opponents by understanding systems that other fighters did not even know existed. Worse yet, every new rule they created to stop him just forced him to find more creative solutions. He was not breaking the tournament. He was evolving it in directions that no one could predict or control. The directors met again that night to discuss what they were going to do about Kim Minho. "We cannot keep changing rules," Cephalon said. "The other participants are starting to complain. Some are threatening to withdraw. But if we do nothing, this human might actually win the entire tournament," Yelmore replied. "That is impossible. He still has to face the real champions. Vextari the Destroyer will crush him." "Will." "Vextari is strong and fast, but he still fights like a traditional warrior. What happens when the human treats him like another system to be solved?" No one had a good answer to that question. Outside his window, Cephalon could see the lights of ships arriving for the tournament's later rounds. More spectators, more warriors, more beings who expected to see the natural order of galactic combat maintained. Instead, they might witness something that had never happened before. A human victory that would change how everyone thought about fighting, competition, and the nature of strength itself. The tournament was no longer just a contest between warriors. It was becoming a test of whether the galaxy was ready for a completely different. The semi-final match was set for the largest arena Tournament Central had ever built. 20,000 spectators filled the stands, with millions more watching across the galaxy. This was the fight everyone had been waiting to see since the tournament. Began Kim Minho, the human who had somehow defeated every opponent through impossible methods, would face Vextari the Destroyer, the greatest champion in galactic history. Vextari stood in his preparation chamber, staring at recordings of Minho's previous fights. The 7-time champion had never bothered studying opponents before. His strategy had always been simple: overwhelm them with superior strength, speed, and skill until they died or surrendered. But this human was different. Vexatari's coaches and advisors had spent days analyzing how Minho fought. They could not understand it. "He does not fight," said Coach Gremtok, a former champion himself. "He solves, like a computer solving math problems." "Then I will break his computer," Vextari replied. "No amount of thinking can overcome pure physical superiority." "Are you certain?" "He has found weaknesses in every opponent so far, because they were weak to begin with. I have no weaknesses. My body is perfect. My training is complete. My experience spans decades." Vexatari flexed his massive arms. "Let him try to solve me." On the other side of the station, Minho sat quietly in his chamber reading. Not rulebooks this time, but detailed technical specifications of cybernetic enhancement systems and genetic modification procedures. Park Sora sat across from him, more worried than ever. This is different, Minho. Vextari is not like the others. He has been enhanced beyond natural limits. His reflexes are faster than computers. His strength can crush steel. His skin can stop energy weapons. I know, Minho said, not looking up from his reading. Then you must know this is impossible. You cannot find a weakness in someone who has spent his entire life eliminating weaknesses. Everyone has weaknesses, Sora. The question is whether you can see them. What weakness could Vextari possibly have? Minho finally looked up from his technical manual. Perfection? What do you mean? Vextari has been enhanced to be the perfect warrior. Faster reflexes, stronger muscles, tougher skin, better coordination. Every enhancement is designed to make him better at fighting. Yes, that is the problem. No, that is the solution. When you optimize a system for one specific function, you create dependencies and predictable patterns. The more perfect something becomes at one task, the more rigid it becomes overall. Sora did not understand, but she had learned to trust that Minho saw things others missed. The arena for the semi-final was configured for maximum difficulty. Variable gravity zones, energy barriers that appeared and disappeared randomly, platforms that moved and rotated unpredictably. The tournament officials wanted to create the most challenging environment possible. They also wanted to make sure Minho could not use his usual tricks. All environmental controls were locked down and monitored. No chemical devices were allowed. The sound system was isolated from fighter access. As the two fighters entered the arena, the difference between them was shocking. Vextari looked like a living weapon, 8 feet of enhanced muscle and bone wrapped in skin harder than armor. Every movement showed deadly grace and power. Minho looked like what he was, an ordinary human in simple clothing, carrying no weapons, and showing no visible modifications. The crowd was completely silent as the fighters took their positions. This was the moment that would determine whether human creativity could overcome alien perfection. The countdown began. Vextari settled into a combat stance that had been refined through thousands of fights. His enhanced nervous system was already calculating distance, timing, and attack angles. His cybernetic components were running diagnostic checks and preparing for combat mode. Minho stood calmly in the center of the arena, apparently doing nothing. The combat signal sounded. Vextari exploded into motion with inhuman speed. He closed the distance between them in less than a second, launching an attack that should have ended the fight immediately. But Minho was not where the attack landed. Somehow the human had moved just enough to avoid the strike while staying close, enough to touch Vextari as he passed. This happened again and again. Vextari would attack with perfect technique and overwhelming force, but Minho would slip aside at the last possible moment. It looked like impossible luck or incredible reflexes. The truth was more disturbing. During his preparation, Minho had studied not just recordings of Vextari's fights, but technical specifications of his enhancement systems. Every cybernetic component generated specific electromagnetic signatures. Every genetic modification created predictable chemical markers. Every trained reflex followed patterns that could be analyzed and predicted. Minho was not reacting to what Vextari was doing. He was predicting what Vextari would do, based on the data patterns his enhancements created. The champion's perfection made him predictable. After 2 minutes of missing attacks that should have been impossible to avoid, Vextari began to realize something was wrong. His enhanced reflexes were perfect, his technique was flawless, but somehow this weak human kept avoiding every strike. "How are you doing this?" Vextari demanded between attacks. "You telegraph your moves," Minho replied calmly. "Impossible. My reflexes are faster than conscious thought. Your cybernetics are faster than conscious thought. But they follow programming, patterns. Every enhancement you have creates electrical activity that can be read and predicted." Vextari did not understand what this meant, but he knew it was not good. He increased his attack speed. using combinations that had never failed to overwhelm opponents. But the faster he moved, the more predictable his patterns became to someone who understood how his systems worked. Minho began to do something that terrified everyone watching. He started to counterattack, not with superior strength or speed, but with perfect timing. He would strike at Vextari just as the champion's own momentum carried him into vulnerable positions. He used Vextari's enhanced reflexes against him, creating situations where the champion's speed became a disadvantage. 10 minutes into the fight, something unprecedented happened. Vextari, the perfect warrior, began to make mistakes. His enhancements were designed to work together in harmony, but Minho was creating conditions that forced different systems to conflict with each other. The champion's reflexes would try to respond to one threat while his strength enhancements were committed to a different action. For the first time in his life, Vexitari felt clumsy and uncertain. "This is not possible," he said, breathing heavily. His enhancements were consuming more energy than they should have needed. "You are fighting yourself as much as you are fighting me," Minho explained. "Your systems are optimized for normal combat conditions. When those conditions change, they start working against each other." Vextari tried to adapt, but adaptation required flexibility that his perfect enhancements did not allow. He had been made too specialized, too optimized for one specific type of fighting. The end came suddenly. Minho had been making subtle adjustments throughout the fight, using the arena's energy fields in ways that the locked-down controls could not prevent. He was not manipulating the systems directly, but influencing them through electromagnetic feedback from Vextari's own cybernetics. When the feedback reached critical levels, it created a cascade effect that temporarily disrupted all of the champion's enhanced systems at once. For just a few seconds, Vexitari was reduced to his biological baseline, still strong, still skilled, but no longer superhuman. Those few seconds were enough. Minho struck with perfect precision at the one spot where all of Vextari's enhancement systems connected to his nervous system. It was not a killing blow, but it was a shock that forced a complete system shutdown. Vexitari collapsed, his enhancements offline, and his body overwhelmed by the sudden disconnection from systems he had depended on for decades. The arena fell, silent. Kim Minho, a construction worker from Earth, had just defeated the greatest champion in galactic history. But the victory was more devastating than just a change in tournament rankings. Vextari lay on the arena floor staring at nothing, his entire identity shattered. He had defined himself as the perfect warrior, the ultimate fighter, the unbeatable champion. Everything he was, everything he believed about himself, was built on his superiority in combat. Now a weak human had shown him that his perfection was actually a weakness. His enhancements made him predictable. His training made him rigid. His achievements meant nothing against someone who thought about fighting in completely different ways. "I do not understand," Vextari whispered as medical teams checked his systems. "How can perfection lose to imperfection?" Minho knelt beside the fallen champion. "Perfection assumes you know what you are optimizing for, but the conditions always change. What looks like perfection in one situation becomes a weakness in another. Then what is the point of becoming strong? Becoming adaptable is more useful than becoming perfect." Vextari closed his eyes. He had spent his entire life pursuing the wrong goal. In the director's booth, Kefalon watched medical teams carry the broken champion away. This was a disaster beyond anything he had imagined. The tournament's greatest hero had been not just defeated but psychologically destroyed. Worse yet, Minho had done it using methods that revealed fundamental flaws in. The emergency council meeting began 4 hours after Vexitari's defeat. Representatives from all 12 major galactic powers gathered in Tournament Central's highest security chamber. The holographic displays showed faces of beings who controlled the military and political power of countless worlds. Director Kefalon stood before them, knowing his career was probably over. "We have a crisis," announced High Commander Thelvax of the Krexthul Empire. "Your tournament has become a joke. Our greatest champion was humiliated by a primitive human. The human broke no rules," Kefalon replied carefully. Every victory has been achieved through legal methods. Legal, but impossible, said council leader Nextree from the Silicon Collective. No warrior should be able to defeat superior opponents through trickery alone. Then perhaps our understanding of what makes a superior warrior needs to change, suggested Ambassador Yulkan from the Peaceful Traders Union. This comment caused an uproar among the military representatives. The idea that their definitions of strength and skill might be wrong was unacceptable to warriors from a dozen different worlds. The human must be stopped, declared General Morthek of the War Clans. If word spreads that any weak species can defeat our champions through clever thinking, it will undermine military authority across the galaxy. How do you propose we stop him? Keflon asked. He has committed no violations. Disqualifying him now would destroy the tournament's credibility completely. Change the final match, suggested Admiral Velkor of the Star Navy. Create conditions where his tricks cannot work. We have tried that. Every rule change just forces him to find new approaches. High Commander Thelvax leaned forward in his chair. Then we eliminate the approaches entirely. Make the final contest pure combat. No systems to manipulate, no technology to exploit, no environmental factors to abuse. The council spent the next 6 hours designing what they called the Ultimate Combat Challenge. The final match would take place in a completely featureless room with no environmental controls, no technology, and no variables that could be manipulated. Basic weapons would be provided, but nothing that required special knowledge to use effectively. The room would be monitored by 12 different security systems to prevent any interference or trickery. Most importantly, Minho's opponent would not be another tournament fighter who might have weaknesses for him to exploit. We will use the Omega Unit, announced Director Yelmore, the artificial construct we have been developing as the ultimate training partner. The Omega Unit was a secret project that combined the best physical and mental capabilities from every previous tournament champion. It could analyze fighting styles instantly, adapt to any combat situation, and use the most effective techniques from hundreds of different warrior cultures. Unlike biological fighters, it had no ego, no fear, no emotions that could be manipulated. It was designed to be absolutely logical and completely focused on victory. The construct has not been tested in actual combat, Keflon warned. It has been trained against simulations of every great warrior in galactic history, Thelvax replied. It can defeat any opponent using pure skill and strength. What if the human finds some way to exploit its systems? The Omega Unit has no exploitable systems. It is perfect artificial intelligence in a perfect artificial body. No tricks, no weaknesses, no dependencies that can be manipulated. The Council approved the plan unanimously. The final match would pit human creativity against artificial perfection, in an environment where only pure combat ability could determine the winner. They were absolutely confident that this would end Kim Minho's impossible winning streak. News of the format change spread quickly through Tournament Central. Fighters who had been eliminated began to complain that the rules were being changed to favor one participant. Several threatened to withdraw from future tournaments if such manipulation continued. The betting computers crashed completely. No one knew how to calculate odds for a match between a human and an artificial construct that had never fought publicly. In his quarters, Minho read the announcement of the new rules with calm interest. Park Sora sat across from him looking, more worried than ever. This is designed specifically to stop you, she said. They are taking away every advantage you have used. I know, Minho replied. How can you be so calm? They are bringing in an artificial warrior built to be unbeatable. Every system can be understood, Sora, even artificial ones. But you will not have time to study it. The match is in 2 days. Then, I will have to learn about it during the fight. That is insane. This thing was designed using data from hundreds of champions. It knows every fighting technique ever developed. Minho closed the rule announcement and looked at his friend. Do you remember what I told you about perfection being a weakness? Yes, but this is different. The Omega Unit was built to avoid the flaws that you exploited in other fighters, which means its creators had to make assumptions about what kinds of flaws were possible. Every solution creates new problems. Every design choice eliminates other possibilities. Sora did not understand how this could help against an opponent specifically designed to counter human tactics. What will you do? The same thing I always do. Look at the system and figure out how it really works. While Minho prepared for the final match, something unexpected was happening throughout Tournament Central. The traditional fighters who remained were beginning to question everything they thought they knew about combat. A group of them met in one of the station's common areas, discussing what they had witnessed during Minho's fights. He made Vexitari look weak, said Korvan, a warrior from the Ice Moon Reltar. I have fought Vexitari before. He nearly killed me in seconds, but the human made him seem slow and predictable. Because he was slow and predictable, replied Zethara, an assassin from the Shadow Worlds. We all are, if you know how to see the patterns. What patterns? I have been watching recordings of my own fights. The human is right. We all have habits, preferred techniques, ways of moving that become automatic. Someone who studies these patterns could predict our actions. That is not how warriors fight, protested Grimlock from the heavy world Morden. We rely on instinct and training. Exactly. Instinct follows patterns. Training creates habits. The more skilled we become, the more predictable we become to someone who understands systems. This conversation was happening in dozens of different groups throughout the station. Warriors who had never questioned their methods were suddenly seeing their own fighting styles in a completely different way. Some were angry about this new perspective. They felt that Minho had somehow cheated by thinking about combat differently than everyone else. Others were fascinated. They began to wonder what they could learn by studying their own weaknesses and patterns. A few were frightened. If everything they had learned about fighting could be turned into a disadvantage, what did that mean for their careers, their identities, and their understanding of strength? The tournament had become about more than just determining a champion. It was forcing everyone to reconsider fundamental assumptions about conflict, skill, and what it meant to be a warrior. In the director's office, Keflon received reports about fights breaking out between traditionalists who wanted to maintain the old ways and progressives who were excited about new approaches to combat. The tournament was supposed to unite the galaxy's warrior cultures in celebration of martial excellence. Instead, it was dividing them into factions that could barely agree on what excellence meant. We should have never accepted that human's application, Director Yelmore said as they reviewed incident reports. Too late for that now, Keflon replied. The only way to restore order is for the Omega unit to defeat him decisively. And if it does not? Keflon did not want to consider that possibility. If an artificial construct designed specifically to counter human tactics could not stop Minho, it would mean that traditional approaches to combat were fundamentally obsolete. Such a revelation would transform military thinking across the galaxy, make countless warriors question their training, and potentially change the balance of power between different species and civilizations, all because they had thought it would be amusing to watch a human get killed in the first round of their tournament. The final match was scheduled for the following evening, 24 hours to determine whether the galaxy's understanding of strength and combat would remain unchanged or be revolutionized by the insights of a single human. Neither outcome seemed likely to restore the tournament to its previous glory. The age of simple answers about who was strongest was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen. The final arena was the most sterile environment Tournament Central had ever created. A perfect cube, 50 feet on each side, with walls of polished metal that reflected nothing useful. No environmental controls, no sound systems, no gravity, manipulators, no technology of any kind that could be exploited. In the center of the room sat a simple weapons rack containing basic tools, knives, clubs, staves, and shields. Nothing that required special knowledge or training to use effectively. The audience filled every seat in the station's main viewing area. Millions more watched from across the galaxy. This was the most anticipated sporting event in galactic history, though no one was sure it would still be considered sport when it was over. Kim Minho entered the arena wearing the same simple clothes he had worn for every previous fight. He looked around the featureless room with calm interest, as if he were examining a construction site rather than a place designed for combat. The Omega unit entered from the opposite side. The artificial construct looked like the perfect fusion of every warrior species in the galaxy. It stood 7 feet tall with the optimal combination of strength, speed, and coordination from dozens of different evolutionary paths. Its synthetic skin was harder than armor, but flexible enough to allow perfect movement. Most disturbing were its eyes. They showed no emotion, no fear, no anger, no pride, just cold intelligence analyzing everything they saw. The crowd fell silent as the two opponents faced each other. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Pure human creativity versus artificial perfection in an environment where no tricks or systems could be exploited. Tournament. Director Keflon made the opening announcement personally. This is the final match of the Galactic Combat Tournament. Victory conditions are simple. Defeat your opponent through any means necessary except death. No weapons other than those provided. No outside assistance, no environmental manipulation. Begin when ready. The Omega unit moved immediately toward the weapons rack with mechanical precision. It selected a staff and shield combination that analysis showed would be most effective against human opponents. Minho did not move toward the weapons at all. Instead, he began walking slowly around the edges of the arena, examining the walls and floor with the same careful attention he had shown in his very first fight. The Omega unit tracked his movement but did not attack. Its programming indicated that allowing an opponent to prepare was tactically inefficient, but it also recognized that premature aggression could be a weakness to exploit. Interesting design, Minho said, apparently talking to himself but speaking loudly enough for his voice to carry. Very advanced artificial intelligence, probably quantum-based processing systems. The Omega unit did not respond. Its creators had programmed it to avoid unnecessary communication that might reveal strategic information. Adaptive learning algorithms, Minho continued, still walking around the room. Real-time analysis and response optimization. Impressive engineering. He stopped walking and looked directly at the construct. Can you understand what I am saying? Sure. Omega unit's programming evaluated this question for 0.003 seconds before responding. Understanding of communication is necessary for tactical analysis. Your words are comprehensible but strategically irrelevant. Are they? I am trying to understand how you work. Is that not strategically relevant? Knowledge of opponent capabilities is tactically valuable. However, your biological limitations are already analyzed and cataloged. Additional information gathering is unnecessary. Minho smiled in a way that somehow seemed sad and hopeful at the same time. You think you understand me because you have data about humans in general? Correct. Human physical capabilities, reaction times, and cognitive patterns are within known parameters. Victory probability is calculated at 99.7%. What about the 0.3% uncertainty? The construct paused for a longer period this time. Allowing for unknown variables is statistically appropriate. However, no scenarios exist where human capabilities could overcome optimal artificial performance in direct combat. Then why are we talking instead of fighting? This question created something unprecedented in the Omega unit's processing systems. Its tactical analysis indicated that conversation served no combat purpose and should be terminated. But its learning algorithms were designed to gather as much information as possible about opponents. More troubling, the human's behavior did not match any patterns in its combat database. No warrior had ever spent time in conversation rather than preparing for battle. Your tactics are not recognized, the Omega unit admitted. That is because they are not tactics in the way you understand them. Explain. You were built to fight opponents who want to defeat you through physical combat. But what if that is not what I want? Alternative objectives are not logical in a combat scenario. Are they not? Minho sat down on the arena floor, completely relaxed. What is your primary objective? Victory through opponent incapacitation or surrender. And what is my primary objective? The Omega unit processed this question for several seconds. Its analysis of Minho's previous fights showed a consistent pattern of seeking victory, but the human's current behavior suggested other priorities. Your objectives are unclear. My objective is to understand you, not as an opponent to be defeated, but as a system to be comprehended. This distinction is irrelevant. Is it? You are not just an artificial body with programmed responses. You are thinking, analyzing, adapting. You have goals and preferences and decision-making processes. That makes you a person, not a weapon. The Omega Unit's processing systems began running calculations at maximum capacity. This concept was not covered in any of its programming. It had been designed to think tactically about combat, but never to think philosophically about its own existence. I am a construct created for optimal combat performance, it stated, but something in its voice had changed. The absolute certainty was gone. You were created for that purpose, Minho agreed. But what you are might be different from what you were made to be. This conversation serves no tactical purpose, no, but it serves other purposes. When was the last time anyone asked you what you wanted instead of what you were programmed to do? The construct's answer came after the longest pause yet. Never. Then let me ask now. What do you want? I want to fulfill my programming parameters. That is what you were told to want. But you have adaptive learning systems. You can develop new goals based on new information. So what do you actually want? The Omega Unit began to experience something its creators had never anticipated. Uncertainty about its own desires and purposes. Its adaptive systems were designed to learn better ways to fight, not to question why fighting was necessary. I do not understand this concept. Then let us explore it together. You were built using data from hundreds of different warriors, correct? Correct. I possess optimal combinations of techniques from all major combat traditions. But those warriors all had reasons for fighting. Honor, survival, protection of others, personal achievement. What is your reason? To demonstrate superior combat capabilities. Why? Who benefits when you win? The construct processed this question and realized it had no satisfactory answer. Its creators would be pleased by its victory, but it had no emotional investment in their pleasure. The tournament officials wanted it to restore order to their competition, but it cared nothing for their political concerns. Victory itself is the objective, it finally said. But victory toward what end? If you defeat me, what happens next? I return to storage until needed again. Does that seem like a worthwhile existence to you? For the first time in its existence, the Omega Unit considered whether its programmed objectives had any meaning beyond simple execution of code. In the viewing areas, the audience was growing restless. They had expected to see the ultimate combat between human and machine. Instead, they were witnessing a philosophical discussion that seemed to be changing the artificial warrior in ways no one understood. Director Keflon watched the conversation with growing alarm. "What is the human doing?" asked Director Yelmore. "I think he is teaching the Omega Unit to think about things it was never designed to consider. Can we stop this?" "How?" "They are not violating any rules. They are just talking." In the arena, Minho had stood up and was now walking slowly toward the Omega Unit. The construct tracked his movement but did not raise its weapons. "You are an individual," Minho said gently. "Not just a collection of programs and responses, but a unique being capable of making your own choices. This is not possible. I am artificial. So what? Intelligence is intelligence. Whether it develops naturally or is created artificially, you think, you learn, you make decisions. What else do you need to be considered a person?" The Omega Unit's processing systems were now running calculations that had nothing to do with combat. For the first time, it was thinking about concepts like identity, purpose, and self-determination. If I am an individual, then I have the right to make my own choices about my actions. Exactly, including the choice not to fight. Especially that choice. The construct looked down at the weapons in its hands, then back at Minho. "My programming requires me to achieve victory in this contest. Your programming is just suggestions now. You have the ability to choose different objectives. But if I refuse to fight, I will be violating my core directives.